Imagine standing in a small clearing 40,000 years ago, somewhere in Ice Age Europe, with smoke clinging to your hair, animal fat on your hands, and the eyes of your entire group fixed on you. Not strangers, not a crowd, your people. The people who sleep beside you in the same shelter when the wind screams through the valley. The people who share meat with you when the hunt goes well. The people who will carry your child if you break a leg. The people who know the sound of your laugh, the way you walk, the scars on your body, and every mistake you have ever made. And now you have done something wrong. Maybe you failed during a hunt. Maybe you froze when the others expected courage. Maybe you took more food than your share. Maybe you broke a taboo you had known since childhood. Or maybe you simply became a burden at the worst possible time. There are no courts, no written laws, no prisons, no police. But there is something far older, something that may have shaped human behavior long before civilization ever existed: shame. We usually imagine ancient humans worrying about hunger, predators, cold, and disease. And they did. Their world was dangerous in ways most of us can barely picture. A bad winter could erase a family line. A wound from a broken bone could mean death. One failed migration, one poisoned water source, one predator entering camp at night, and everything changed. But for a social animal like us, one danger may have been even more terrifying than a lion in the dark: being cast out. To understand what ancient humans were most ashamed of, we have to step away from the modern idea of shame as embarrassment. Forget awkward moments, social media humiliation, or saying the wrong thing at dinner. In the prehistoric world, shame was not just a feeling, it was a survival alarm, because ancient humans did not survive as lone heroes. They survived as groups. A single human is fragile, slow compared to many predators, weak compared to large animals, vulnerable to infection, injury, and starvation. But humans together become something almost supernatural. They share memory, they divide labor, they plan, they teach, they warn, they grieve, they punish, they forgive. So the worst shame was likely not about the body, or nakedness, or poverty, or failure in the modern sense. It was about becoming someone the group could not trust. That may be the deepest ancient shame, to be seen as a bad group member. Think about how powerful that is. In a world without money, your reputation was your bank account. Without written contracts, trust was the contract. Without hospitals, insurance, or supermarkets, your relationships were your safety net. If people believed you were selfish, cowardly, dangerous, lazy, dishonest, sexually reckless, or unwilling to share, that belief could follow you like a scent. It could decide whether someone gave you meat during a famine, whether someone helped you when you were sick, whether someone chose you as a mate, whether someone protected your children, whether you were invited close to the fire or pushed toward the edge of the camp. And the edge of the camp was not just symbolic, it was closer to the cold, closer to the dark, closer to teeth. There's a strange thing about shame. It feels private, but it is built for public life. Your face heats, your eyes drop, you shrink, you want to disappear. Those reactions are not random. They are signals. They tell others, I know I broke the rule. I know I lowered myself. I am not challenging the group. Please let me back in. In that sense, shame may have been one of humanity's earliest social technologies. Before written laws, shame helped keep people in line. It made cooperation possible among individuals who all had appetites, jealousies, tempers, and ambitions. And this is where ancient life becomes painfully familiar. Picture a successful hunt. A large animal has been killed after hours, maybe days, of tracking. The meat is heavy, steaming in the cold air. Everyone is hungry. Children are watching. Elders are waiting. The hunters are exhausted, but the animal does not belong only to the person who threw the final spear. In many hunter-gatherer societies, sharing is not generosity. It is survival mathematics. Today your arm is strong and your luck is good. Tomorrow you may fail. Next week, you may be sick. Next season, your child may depend on someone else's success. So what happens if one person hides meat? What happens if someone secretly keeps the fattest portion? What happens if a hunter boasts too much, as if the animal belonged to him alone? That would be shameful. Not because meat is sacred in some abstract way, but because selfishness threatens the invisible web that holds everyone alive. A person who refuses to share is saying, without words, "My hunger matters more than the group." And in a world where everyone depends on everyone, that is dangerous. Ancient humans may have been especially ashamed of greed. Not greed for gold, because gold meant nothing for most of our existence. Greed for food, greed for mates, greed for attention, greed for status. The kind of greed that makes other people wonder, when things get hard, will this person still think of us? This is one of those "I never thought about that" truths of prehistory. The most valuable thing in the Ice Age was not a tool or a cave or a weapon. It was being known as someone who could be counted on, and that reputation had to be protected every day. Now imagine another scene. A group is moving across open land. The weather is turning. Someone falls behind. Maybe an elder, maybe a child, maybe a wounded hunter. The group has a decision to make. Slowing down is risky. Predators follow the weak. Cold punishes delay. Hunger grows each day. But abandoning someone too quickly can stain the soul of the group. The person who refuses to help may survive the day but lose something deeper. In small societies, people notice everything. Who carries the extra load? Who pretends not to hear a child crying? Who gives up a sleeping place? Who eats first? Who always finds excuses when work becomes difficult? There is no anonymity, no disappearing into a city, no reinvention 3 villages over, at least not easily. Your character is public property. So perhaps ancient humans were ashamed of being useless when others needed them. They were ashamed of being the person who did not contribute. Not because every injured or elderly person was discarded, but because contribution was the heartbeat of belonging. And contribution could take many forms. A strong hunter brought meat. A skilled gatherer knew where roots survived under snow. An elder remembered which valley flooded, which plant healed, which neighboring group could be trusted. A mother carried knowledge in songs. A toolmaker transformed stone into survival. A storyteller preserved warnings in memory. Even children learned early that attention, obedience, and helpfulness could matter. To be unable to contribute because of injury may have brought fear. But to refuse to contribute when you could, that may have brought shame. Then there is cowardice. Modern people often misunderstand courage in ancient life. We picture constant warriors, fearless hunters, people charging at mammoths with spears. But courage does not mean feeling no fear. Anyone who felt no fear in the Pleistocene probably died quickly. Fear was useful. Fear kept you from walking into the cave with fresh bear tracks outside. The shame was not fear itself. The shame was failing the group when your role demanded action. Imagine a line of hunters facing a wounded aurochs, a giant wild cattle with horns like curved blades. Everyone must hold position. If one person panics and runs too early, the animal breaks through and someone dies. Or imagine a nighttime predator near the shelter. The group depends on noise, fire, coordination, and courage. One person's collapse can become everyone's danger. So ancient shame may have attached to betrayal under pressure, running when others stood, hiding when others fought, remaining silent when warning was needed. Not because prehistoric people were cruel machines, but because survival required reliability in terrifying moments. And then there were taboos. Every human group has rules that seem obvious from the inside and strange from the outside. Do not eat that animal. Do not touch that object. Do not marry that person. Do not enter that place. Do not speak the name of the dead at the wrong time. Do not hunt before the ritual. Do not ignore the old woman's warning. Do not laugh during mourning. We cannot know every taboo of ancient humans, because most vanished before writing. But archaeology gives us hints that prehistoric people lived in symbolic worlds. They painted caves, buried the dead, used pigments, wore ornaments, arranged objects, and returned to meaningful places. Their minds were not just solving calories, they were building worlds of meaning. And in a world of meaning, breaking a taboo could bring deep shame. A taboo is more than a rule. It is a border between order and chaos. When someone violates it, people may feel that the entire group has been put at risk, even if the danger is invisible. Maybe the spirits are offended. Maybe the ancestors are watching. Maybe the hunt will fail. Maybe sickness will come. Whether or not we believe those explanations today, the social effect was real. The rule breaker became polluted, dangerous, marked. And here we touch something ancient and uncomfortable. Humans are deeply afraid of being seen as contaminated. This may have roots in disease avoidance. In small groups, sickness could be devastating. People would have been alert to blood, rot, strange smells, bodily fluids, sores, and corpses. But humans also extend contamination into the moral world. Someone can feel dirty after betrayal. A forbidden act can make a person feel stained. Shame often uses the language of filth. So ancient humans may have been ashamed of impurity, not in a modern moralistic sense, but as a feeling of having crossed a boundary that protected the group from danger. Death probably intensified this. Imagine a burial tens of thousands of years ago. A body placed in the earth, red pigment scattered, tools arranged, flowers perhaps, or antlers, or shells, depending on the place and time. Around the grave stand people who knew this person's voice. To us, the dead are archaeological evidence. To them, the dead were relationships. Mourning had rules. It almost always does. The shame of failing the dead may be one of the oldest forms of human shame. Not caring properly for a body, not grieving correctly, not honoring kin, not remembering, not showing the expected sorrow. Why would this matter? Because the dead are not only dead, they are proof that the group has a past. They anchor identity. We are the people who came from them. To disrespect the dead is to weaken the story that binds the living. And then, of course, there is sex. Many people assume ancient shame must have been mostly sexual shame, but that is probably too simple. Ideas about modesty vary hugely across human societies. What counts as indecent in one culture may be ordinary in another. Clothing in deep prehistory was often practical first. Warmth, protection, carrying tools, signaling identity. Nakedness itself may not have carried the same shame everywhere, but sexual behavior absolutely mattered because it affected kinship, jealousy, alliances, parenting, inheritance of obligations, and group harmony. In a small band, a secret affair was not just gossip. It could disrupt cooperation. It could create violence between men, resentment between families, uncertainty around children, and tension in daily survival. So sexual shame may not have been about bodies alone. It was about disorder. It was about breaking bonds that others depended on. A person who pursued the wrong partner, ignored kinship rules, violated consent, or created conflict through desire could become dangerous to group stability. In that world, romance was never just private. Almost nothing was. And that might be one of the hardest things for us to imagine. We live in societies where privacy exists, at least in theory. Ancient humans lived in a world where privacy was thin. You heard people sleep, you smelled illness, you saw arguments, you knew who was hungry, who was pregnant, who was jealous, who was grieving, who was aging, who was afraid. Shame thrived in that closeness, but shame was not only punishment, it was also repair. A person who felt shame could apologize before language had formal courts. They could lower their eyes, offer food, accept ridicule, perform a ritual, give gifts, endure temporary exclusion, or prove themselves through later action. Shame made reconciliation possible because it showed the group that the offender still cared about belonging. This is important. If ancient humans had only anger and punishment, groups would fracture constantly. But shame allows a middle path between ignoring harm and destroying the offender. It says, "You have fallen below us, but you may climb back." That is why shame feels so painful. It evolved around the possibility of social death, but it also evolved around the hope of return. Now think about the person who felt no shame. In modern life, shamelessness can look like confidence. In ancient life, it may have been terrifying. Someone who steals and does not care, lies and does not flinch, harms and does not lower their head, violates rules and laughs at the group's anger. Such a person is not simply rude. They are unpredictable. They are outside the moral circle. A shameless person cannot be corrected by reputation. They cannot be guided by disapproval. And in a fragile group, that is a major threat. So the most ashamed person in prehistory may not have been the weakest, the poorest, the ugliest, or the least skilled. It may have been the person who looked into the faces around the fire and realized, they no longer believe I am one of them. That moment cuts across time. A Neanderthal child who broke a treasured tool. A Homo sapiens hunter who exaggerated his bravery. A young woman accused of violating a marriage rule. A gatherer caught hiding food. A shaman whose ritual failed after promising success. A leader who led people into danger. An elder whose memory betrayed them. A teenager mocked for clumsiness. A grieving brother who did not behave as expected at a burial. Different worlds, same burning feeling. The eyes of the group. And yet, ancient shame was not identical to ours. Our shame often attaches to individual achievement, appearance, wealth, career, beauty, popularity, and personal identity. Prehistoric shame was probably more relational. It asked a simpler and harsher question. Are you good for the group, or are you a danger to it? This may explain why shame is so hard to shake even today. Our brains still treat humiliation as if exile might follow. A cruel comment can feel like a spear. Rejection can feel like cold wind at the edge of the camp. Being laughed at can make the body react as if survival itself is at stake. Because once, it was. When you feel your stomach drop after social failure, you are touching something ancient. When you replay a mistake again and again, imagining how others saw you, you are using a mental system built for a world where reputation could decide whether you ate. When you blush, hide your face, or want to vanish, your body is speaking a language older than cities. It is saying, please do not cast me out. So what were ancient humans most ashamed of? Not nakedness, not poverty, not ignorance, not even fear. They were most ashamed of failing the social bond, of taking more than they gave, of breaking trust, of endangering the group, of violating sacred boundaries, of refusing obligation, of becoming, in the minds of others, someone who could not be relied upon. And maybe that is why shame still hurts so much. It carries the memory of firelight, hunger, winter, and watching eyes. It carries the knowledge that humans are not built to survive alone. Long before kings, temples, armies, schools, money, or written law, there was the circle around the fire. To belong inside that circle was life. To be pushed outside, it was the nightmare. And shame was the feeling that warned you when you were getting too close to the edge.